I don't know much, but I know that there are few feelings worse as a football fan than this feeling right here. And for the second time in the history of this podcast, I have to have this conversation. And I am not looking forward to it. Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 152, I believe. My name's Austin Elmore. Thank you for being here. I wish it was under better circumstances. Yes, the Bengals won the football game against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, beating Jacksonville 31-27. Really did it right at the very end, thanks to a come-from-behind, game-winning drive by Jake Browning and the Bengals are 2-0. First time Cincinnati has been 2-0 since 2018. And coming up this week in Minnesota, they have a chance to go 2-0 or 3-0 for the first time since 2015. If you're a Bengals fan, you know that 2015 team started 8-0 and were one of the better teams in the Marvin Lewis era. More on them at a later date, I'm sure, but let's not bury the lead here. The biggest issue is once again a season-ending injury to Joe Burrow. Now, you might be yelling at however you're listening or watching to this right now saying, it's not season-ending. They said it'd only be 3 months. He'll be back in December. Listen, I hope that's true. I hope that's what we're talking about. I hope in December we're talking about Joe Burrow coming back. It's the bolster that the Bengals need to put them over the top and get into the playoffs and sneak their way in, and here come the Bengals. But I don't believe that's going to happen. Burrow on Sunday suffered a grade 3 turf toe. That means that your toe, basically, your big toe, is bent backwards towards your shin, essentially, and all the ligaments and tendons and everything underneath your big toe that connect the foot to your toe tear. And that's what happened with Joe. Ligaments, tendons, whatever you want to call it, it was all torn. And Joe has a severe grade 3 turf toe injury that requires surgery. Now, turf toe, in and of itself, is not an uncommon NFL injury by any stretch of the imagination. It's very common with wide receivers and defensive backs, notably because of the cutting and the change of direction and some of the tackles that are made on them. That sort of thing can happen pretty frequently to those guys. What happens very rarely is a grade 3 turf toe that requires surgery, and it's even more rare that it happens to a quarterback. So here we are for the second time in 3 years that we're talking about a rare, unprecedented ligament injury to Joe Burrow. In 2023, it was the wrist injury that happened in that Thursday night game against Baltimore. There was unprecedented receivers, quarterbacks, Major League Baseball pitchers. Like, you couldn't find anybody that had that specific type of surgery. And Joe came back from it and was obviously incredible last year. He has this great season. He wins NFL Comeback Player of the Year for the second time because let us not forget he had a season-ending injury his rookie year in 2020 where he destroyed basically every ligament in your left knee. Joe ended his season that year. He ended his season in 2023. He's had a calf strain. He's had an MCL sprain. At one point, he had a throat contusion. He had a pinky issue. He's been banged up. Unfortunately, a label now exists for Joe Burrow that says he's injury-prone. And whether or not we think that's fair, it's now become a part of Joe's story. Hell, you could even go back to when he was at Ohio State. He loses out on the starting job to Dwayne Haskins because he breaks his hand. That sort of stuff has happened in Joe's career. And then you go back to a year ago where he puts up the best season in the history of the Bengals franchise, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, thousands of yards, rewrites every record. And then he goes into the offseason with a fully healthy offseason. And you're thinking, finally, Joe has a normal offseason. And he gets his receivers. He gets T, and he gets Jamar, and he gets Mike Gesicki. And Trey Hendrickson's contract situation gets figured out. And he gets through training camp fully healthy, and they win the first game. Finally, everything is going the Bengals' direction. And then, midway through the second quarter, the pocket collapses. Burrow is unable to get the ball out on a quick slant to Jamar Chase because Chase was jammed at the line of scrimmage. Joe turns to go back to his other reads. Pocket collapses. He tries to avoid it. He gets tackled. As he's getting tackled, his left foot gets caught on the turf. bends his toes backwards as he falls forwards, and his season is basically over. Now, it requires surgery. The optimistic timeline is 3 months from now, which puts him back in mid-December. Again, that is optimistic. And any foot, ankle, toe specialist will tell you probably not going to be right on the money 3 months. This is an injury that changes you. It changes your explosiveness. It changes the way you feel. It changes and lingers throughout your entire career. There have been extreme cases, like Deion Sanders has had multiple surgeries due to his turf toe. It eventually led to blood clots in Deion's foot and his ankles. Deion had to get 2 toes amputated over the course of his life, and more recently this happened, and he's dealt with blood clots and all sorts of stuff. It can be a tricky and scary and fickle injury that changes a person, changes their explosiveness, changes their footwork, changes a lot of stuff, especially for a quarterback with that left foot, that lead foot. Now, is it better that it's his left than his right? Probably, because you're not driving off that left foot like you are driving off the right foot. But either way, we're talking about a Burrow injury that has essentially, in my mind, and I am by no means a medical professional, but just talking and reading and learning about it, I don't see how it's plausible that the guy comes back in mid-December. And I would imagine the Bengals are going to protect him. If they're out of the race, no chance he comes back. If they're in the race, well, then you probably stick with the guy who got you there in Jake Browning and wait fully for Joe to get fully healed, and maybe he would come back for the playoffs. I don't know. That's a conversation for later on. But the bigger conversation is that even though the Bengals are 2-0 and they beat Jacksonville and their defense was once again opportunistic and they got lucky and they benefited from bad calls and questionable decisions by opposing coaches and drops once again, and a backup quarterback led them on a game-winning touchdown drive, the Bengals are 2-0, but it feels like the season is over. It feels like they're 2-0. And that's the difficult part for me to deal with. Because I thought, and speaking from a personal standpoint, I've had a bit of a rough summer. I've had a bit of a rough year. I've had a lot going on. Football season is my happy place. It's where I get the most excited. I look forward to it. Life feels at peace and comfortable, and I'm entertained, and I'm satisfied, and I'm happy, and I look forward to it. Even when the Bengals do not perform well, there is still a joy that in my life comes from football season. It's difficult when there are expectations attached to the Bengals like there are this year. It's difficult when my line of work directly is impacted by the Bengals, when financially the amount of money that I receive is impacted by the way the Bengals perform, especially when they do well. It's good for me. It's good for business. And when the star player, the guy who his face is on the coffee cup that I drink in these episodes, his jersey is hanging to my left right now, who I have a what are those things called? A Funko Pop of, that I just got a Skyline Chili bobblehead of. A guy that I feel like I relate to because he comes from a small town in Ohio just like me, and maybe has a personality that's not quite understood. And a guy who came to Cincinnati and chose to be here. He could have thrown a hissy fit. He could have gone anywhere else. He chose to be here. He chose to want to change the culture. He signed a long-term extension to be here. A guy who it felt like has gone through a lot of stuff for us and for Bengals fans and brought hope and change and a spark to this city that we have never felt before when it comes to this football team. He once again has to go through something so shitty. That's difficult. It's difficult for fans because, yeah, they're 2-0, and yeah, Jake Browning is without question a capable backup quarterback. It still feels like the season is over. It still feels like there's no hope. And that's a difficult thing to deal with. It's a difficult thing to navigate. You know, I was watching Hard Knocks this year, and they do this like montage with Josh Allen, and they talk about how important Josh Allen is to the city of Buffalo and how he's everywhere on Pepsi commercials, in local commercials, in hospitals, visiting kids, and He's everywhere. The relationship he has with the digital team, the relationship he has with his wife, and everywhere, Josh Allen, and how important singularly he is to that city and to those people and to that fan base. And it is because he is a beacon of hope to a franchise that wants to win. It's the same way in Cincinnati. I mean, hell, J.D. Vance lives here. He's shutting down roads over on the west side or on the east side all the time because of his security detail. He's not the most famous person that lives in Cincinnati. It's Joe Burrow. Certainly he's not the most popular person that lives here. It's Joe Burrow. And with him, the weight that he carries on his shoulders as the starting quarterback is the weight of the franchise. It's all those expectations. And now it feels like, well, if we don't have Joe, the playoffs were already going to be difficult, and the roster probably already has holes and young players that need to develop, and Joe's not going to be able to carry us. Jake probably won't be able to carry us. How do we get to where we want to go? It's unfair to Jake Browning. It's unfair to the rest of the Bengals. It's unfair to the coaching staff, but it's reality. How do we feel like we're going to get to where we want to go without Joe Burrow? And so, while Bengals fans feel this overwhelming sadness about the idea that the season could be over, and also this overwhelming sadness that comes with the compassion and the empathy of humanity, and being a human being with this guy who has dealt with injury after injury after injury, and another offseason full of rehab that's lonely and difficult and grinding that he's going to have to deal with. That's disheartening. And mentally, I'm sure it takes a toll on him. He might be built different. He might be a Kobe Bryant type of guy. That's fine. But for any young person, doesn't matter how many millions of dollars you make, to go through this over and over and over again, it's difficult. It's mentally taxing. And Joe, after his wrist injury against Baltimore a couple of years ago, he openly talked about how he has pondered his football mortality. You can't help but think of Andrew Luck, right? Who wouldn't? Very similar situations. Maybe not similar people, maybe not similar personalities, certainly different stages of life. Andrew had a family at this point. Joe doesn't have a wife or kids or anything like that. So different people, but similar situations. And so when you look at the expectations of the football team and how that is now shifted, and you try to be empathetic towards the human Joe Burrow and all this crap that he has to deal with once again, and it being a fluke injury or it being the offensive line's fault or whatever, there also is a feeling of anger. Now, on the particular play that had happened, Jamar Chase gets jammed at the line of scrimmage. The play doesn't make sense really with the protection. Joe pulls the ball down, tries to do a weird freak injury. Not really any one person's fault other than things went south on a normal football play. But yet, it is indicative of a grander picture and a bigger issue within the organization that the Bengals continue to struggle to do even the basics correct. You put a $275 million contract on the table for Joe Burrow. He signs it. You invest in him. And the Bengals, to their credit, have tried to fix their offensive line. Let me start by debunking this narrative that the Bengals don't do enough to surround Joe Burrow and to help protect Joe Burrow. They have spent draft capital. They have spent money. They have spent free agency. They have taken shots at protecting Joe Burrow. They are on their third offensive line coach since Joe has been here. They have invested in that position, but the problem is that they have failed. And so we're looking for somebody to blame. Do we want to blame Dalton Reisner? Do we want to blame Ted Karras? Do we want to blame Orlando Brown Jr.? Do we want to blame Jim Turner, the original offensive line coach, or Frank Pollock after him, or now Scott Peters? Do we want to blame Zach Taylor and his style of offense? Do we want to blame Duke Tobin, the director of player personnel? Do we want to blame Mike Brown, the owner? Do we want to blame Joe for trying to do too much and not getting rid of the ball? There's everybody looking now for somebody to point the blame to. And when you look at some of the numbers around Joe Burrow and his career, and it's crazy. Let me read some of these. These are from Warren Sharp from Sharp Football Analysis. It's amazing Joe Burrow has been sacked 164 times in the last 4 seasons. He's been hit within 2.5 seconds of the snap more than any other quarterback in the league. And yet the Bengals still win. It's still ranking the top 10 in wins during that stretch. It's incredible. Their pass block win rate since 2021, they were 30th in 21. They were 30th in 22. They were 27th in 23. They were dead last year. 4 straight years ranking 27th or worse. There's so many different avenues to discuss about the Bengals and their inability to figure out their offensive line and their plan to protect Joe Burrow. It's maddening. How have they not been able to figure it out by this point? So, reading this verbatim from Warren Sharp, talking about Joe Burrow had been hit within 2.5 seconds of the snap, more than any other quarterback in the league, and the Bengals still rank top 10 in wins over that stretch. He says, if that doesn't blow your mind, it should, because no other elite quarterback in the NFL is asked to do more with less than Joe Burrow. Since 2021, Burrow ranks in the top 10 in expected points added, success rate, yards per attempt, accuracy, and completion percentage. He is the only quarterback in the NFL that can say that. Not Mahomes, not Allen, not Jackson. He has been this efficient while working with the least help imaginable. Among all 38 quarterbacks with 750-plus dropbacks since 2021, Joe Burrow ranks number 3 in shotgun rate, number 35 in play-action rate, number 30 in motion rate. That means he's running the most stripped-down offense of any top-tier quarterback in the NFL. As Sharp says, no disguise, no deception, no help. And that's just the passing game. He gets into the numbers as well about the running game, and we've talked about that on here. It just doesn't make sense how this happens. Only one team in the league, continuing on from Warren Sharp, only one team in the league has allowed more quick pressures to their quarterback, and no one has allowed more hits within 2.5 seconds than the Bengals. No quarterback has been hit quicker or more violently than Joe Burrow, and yet he keeps winning. And so the conversation in Cincinnati this week has kind of been, okay, who do we blame for this? You can blame the offensive line, blah, 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 but eventually you start to go to, well, what about the scheme? Jake Browning and the Bengals offensive line seems to do better when he's in the game instead of Joe Burrow. How do you explain that? And I think the Bengals have done a good job of trying to tailor the offense to what Joe does well. And there are times in which it works. But it's also a question of, is this best for the long term of Joe Burrow and his football mortality? And also, is there something to be said about the ability to run the football more effectively like those other teams do to take some of the pressure off your quarterback? And should there be a point in which you do not exceed when building the offense around Joe Burrow? Zach Taylor met with the media earlier this week. He was asked about, you know what, I'm going to leave the question in. This is the question from Paul Dehner Jr. Listen to about 2.5 minutes of Zach's answer.
Zach, do you feel like when you think about this injury happening to Joe and another injury you guys are dealing with, that you have to organizationally start to rethink how you protect Joe and the way that you guys have gone about that?
It's unfortunate that this happened. But again, that's part of football, and that's what's going to happen. Guys are in the pocket, guys are moving around. I don't know how a turf toe injury fully happens, how you got to get hit or stepped on. I know that potentially he could have been clean for 99% of the game, and the one play is where this happens. And so I get it. I understand where people are going to come from. It's going to be very attacking of us and our style of play. That's got us to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship and 2 division titles and won a lot of games for us. So We're always evaluating how we can protect our players and put them in the best position possible. So I take accountability for that. And if people want to blame me for putting them in a position, I'm fine taking that. But we'll continue to put the best plan forward to put Jake in a great position to go help us beat Minnesota.
What would you say to those people that look at the offensive line?
I don't really worry about the outside noise. We are always working to be the best version of the Cincinnati Bengals and trying to put ourselves in the best position. The players have bought in, the coaches have bought in. We feel like we put ourselves in a great position here at 2-0 by beating two teams that are difficult teams to beat. And so that's all I can say. I can't answer to everybody. You're never going to please 100% of the people. Whatever I say will please some, not the others. And so I'm very accepting of that and embrace the role that we're in. You know, it's challenging, and we'll continue to find ways to be successful.
Where's your confidence level in the offensive line right now?
Very high. If people are looking at the offensive line as the number one reason in that thing, that was an all 11 people on the same page in that last game. So especially early on, there's some things that we got to correct at every position to be able to all be on the same page. It is as simple as that. And that's coaching, that's the receivers, that's the tight ends, that's the running backs, and that's the offensive line and the quarterback all working in unison with each other. So again, it's the line always takes all the blame for it. I've got confidence in those guys, and we're going to continue to get their best going forward.
Bengals head coach Zach Taylor. I don't know what to make of that. I'm a little bit frustrated by it. Yes, you know, pelts on the wall, division titles, won a lot of games, Super Bowl, AFC Championship. There's something to all of that. But if you don't look at this situation in which we are once again faced with Joe Burrow having a potentially season-ending injury, now in the third time for 6 years of his NFL career, if you don't look around and say, okay, we might have to change something in order to just keep this guy upright, in order to protect ourselves, in order to protect Joe, then I don't know if you should be in that position anymore. Like, clearly there is something that needs to change in the mentality, in the identity of the football team so that you can better protect your quarterback. So do you want to blame it all on the front office? Sure. Okay. You want to blame a bunch of it on Zach? Fine. I think some of it belongs on Burrow himself. Not nearly as much as belongs on those other people. But it's just shitty that we are in this situation again. Again. Bengals made a couple of roster moves. They did put Burrow on injured reserve. He could come back later in the season if he's healthy enough to do so. Again, I have my doubts about that. They've signed a couple of quarterbacks. First and foremost, Brett Rippon, who was on the practice squad. He's been elevated to the active roster. He will be Jake Browning's backup when they go to Minnesota this week. They've also signed two other quarterbacks. Mike White, formerly with the New York Jets and most recently with the Buffalo Bills, and Sean Clifford, the St. Xavier Cincinnati native, drafted by the Packers a couple of years ago, released by Green Bay this offseason. He's been signed to the practice squad as well. I think moving forward, Mike White's going to end up being the backup to Jake Browning, but this week it's going to be Brett Rippon backing up Jake Browning. I asked on Instagram, and if you don't follow me, you should, at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. I asked for your questions, your comments, your concerns, your thoughts, and while most people are understandably depressed following that, we did get a couple of responses. We didn't get a lot of questions. Question number one, or response number one, no question, just depressed. Yeah. Number two, I'm numb, not happy, not sad, just numb. Groundhog Day. Next man up. And finally, what is Caleb Williams again? Caleb Williams is ass. He's no good. All right, that does it for this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. We'll get more into the Bengals and Vikings later this week. We'll recap a little bit of what happened in the National Football League in week number 2. Look ahead to week number 3, of course, as well. That's all coming up later this week, but of course had to do a Burrow-centric episode here today. Thanks, he said, stuttering. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Ball Don't Lie podcast. Check out Cincy 360 weekdays from noon to 3 on ESPN 1530. Follow me on all socials at Auty Elmore. And leave a like, subscribe, follow, tell somebody about it, share it with somebody, please. Please, please help the podcast grow. And as always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.